This is The Philanthropy Show, connecting and inspiring philanthropy.
Welcome to The Philanthropy Show. I'm your host, Luann Saraga-Walters. Events, whether annual or volunteer appreciation events are definitely a staple for nonprofits. So how do you know what are the essential elements needed to make every event a successful event? When should you start planning? So many things to be concerned of to make sure that that event goes off without a hitch and draws in more support for more donors. Well, joining us today, we have a very special event planner, a guru of events, and also a good friend of ours, Trace Kingham of Kingham Signature Events, the founder and president, and he's just a remarkable man who does a lot of work with nonprofits in the Tampa Bay area, and very glad that you could be with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm
excited
to be here.
We're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff. Events, they are a lot of fun. They're
Absolutely.
A lot of work, but they're so much fun. And when you and I were talking about the idea for this show, we were saying, how can we actually plan for this? Mm-hmm. So let's talk first about your background, how you became involved in event planning. What is it that you really love about event planning?
Okay. Yeah, sure. I got my start in theater, and as a starving artist, I found work in theater and events. So I was approached by an organization, a nonprofit organization, doing goodwill in the Caribbean islands, and
awesome.
I got to travel to all the different islands and help put on, eyeglass exams and bringing doctors down from Miami to do inoculations and shots and whatnot and beach cleanup. So it was really an exciting time, and it really gave me an opportunity to utilize my degree and still, with the production side of my degree. And we did a big gala to support the good works that we were doing in the islands, and I just fell in love with events. That live aspect. You only get one shot to get it right. So the pressure to
well,
to
that's
make all
that
the
live
details.
presence, like theater.
Right,
it's
right.
live.
It's live. But you have rehearsals in theater where a lot of times you don't in events. You only have that one chance to get it right. So the stakes are really high in events, and I just love that energy behind it. You got to get it right and all the details leading up to it. So that's what's exciting for me is seeing it all come off without a hitch. And you only get one time to do it. So.
And you work with both corporate, for-profit, and nonprofit events.
Right.
Do you see? Is there, other than the amount of money that may be spent on the event, do you see a significant difference in the planning of them? Or are they pretty much the same process?
Pretty much the same process. I think that there is a myth that corporations do spend a lot. And there are those that do, certainly. And there's a lot of large nonprofits that spend a lot.
Well.
So, but with the changing times, there's a lot of scrutiny comes with the budget, not only in the corporate world, but also obviously nonprofit. So, but I enjoy that aspect. It's trying to figure out what you can create with a little. I worked in Big Brothers Big Sisters, worked for them doing events, and it was always a challenge to create an amazing experience that was on brand for pretty much no money, so which I know a lot of organizations struggle with. So
well, and thank you in advance, because I know that you also donate a portion back by what is it that you say you claim one nonprofit every year that you'll do an event for?
Yeah, I go out into the community and I'm approached quite often. Hey, can you help with this? And I really examine what it is that they're doing and how it affects me and my passions, and I try to do at least one event each year to support as a pro bono for the organization and lend my talents and time to help them pull that off. So.
And that's where Sharon and I met you, was actually at Women Reshaping the World, which was in the Tampa Bay area, and it's actually throughout the North American continent, I guess. But and that was a lot of fun working with you on that too. So I want to talk a little bit about best practices. You mentioned a lot of times nonprofits don't have a lot to put into the event, and I think they also think that's time, because they wear so many hats trying to get it done. So from that standpoint, let's talk about timing. When is it too soon, or is it too soon to start planning for your annual event?
Yeah, if you're doing an annual event, I think that my recommendation is you may take a week or two off, take a deep breath, and get right back at it. Because
right after
the event, a lot of nonprofits organizations wait. Oh my gosh, because it is so time intensive, and your energy, and you just put so much into it, and then you got to relax a little. But don't take too much time, because you want to capitalize on the excitement that your donors and your guests that has just experienced, because it's still in the forefront of their mind. That's the time to go back and say, hey, we hope you had a great time. Follow up. Make sure you're doing the asks for your donors right afterwards.
That's interesting that you're saying that, because I think sometimes we look at the follow-up as separate from the planning of the next event.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
it's just the
exactly.
follow-up of that event, and then we start planning the next event several months down the road, maybe a month or two ahead of time, so people can do a save the date, right?
Right, right.
But, so you're saying follow up and then continue that conversation.
Keep that conversation going and find opportunities that you can relay back to the guests of what you as an organization are doing with the funds that you raised at your event. So that's one way of keeping them engaged with what's happening. So for example, if you're raising money to support Big Brothers Big Sisters, for example, you could utilize opportunities to educate them on what you've been doing with the funds, whether it's hiring more social workers so you can have more bigs.
I like that.
You know, so it's a way to keep them engaged, and they know that their funds that they spend on tickets or auction items is going to a good cause.
Then the event becomes a part of the year-round activity of the nonprofit, as
Right.
opposed to a standalone place and time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're constantly bringing that back, and I like that.
Right.
That's the first time
And
I've
a
ever heard somebody
lot-
describe it that way.
You know, a lot of organizations don't do that. They really, and I've helped a lot in that. It's a struggle because it's a lot of time. So sometimes you have to look at, well, maybe we need a little outside help. You know,
absolutely.
and as a planner helping organizations, I don't have to do all the pieces and parts. So there's plenty of planners out there that can help organizations just with maybe the follow-up. Maybe they do need that break with their internal staff because they may have other projects and events that they're working on. So you just really need to look at it, but don't lose that momentum that you've gained and just keep it rolling year after year after year.
It's a philosophical shift. So from a more nitty-gritty standpoint, if you're looking at your timeline for your event and you've been following up, when should you start the process of, I need to send out my save the date? Is that 2 weeks out? Is it 4 weeks out? Is it 2 months out? So that they know, here comes this event, not to, the save the date. And then you got to follow up with your invitations. And is there a rule of thumb, or is it?
Yeah, I think that ideally if you could announce the date at the event that you just had for next year is a great way to do it. But, honestly, in best practices, you should have your lead sponsor already lined up from year to year.
Awesome.
3, maybe even 3, they know that this organization A is this year, organization B is the next year, and organization C is the following year after that.
Wow.
So again, it's really being diligent and keeping that event alive. But I would say you'd want to at least do 6 months for a save the date, and then do a couple months. 8 to 12 weeks is best practice for invitations.
I'm hearing gasps across the internet. Like, really? Wow, we sent it out 2 months ahead, and we thought that was a lot.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
because you're competing with a lot of different organizations for those funds and those donors' attention, and you want to be the first one on their calendar.
And you brought up something that I want to talk about, but we have to take a break. So when we come back, we're going to look into, then what time is a good time to have your event because of the competing events that we have, and also what are some of the essential elements that we should really be looking at to include in the event itself. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This show sponsored in part by
My Paper Pusher. Consider it done.
Follow the Philanthropy Show on Facebook for behind-the-scenes action, polls, and commentary.
Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show, talking today with Trace Kingham of Kingham Signature Events, an event guru who's giving us some really good pointers for best practices and some timing, some essential elements. So let's talk about that a little bit. When should, there's a lot of discussion around, do we have it in the fall? Do we have it in the spring? If we have it in the summer, there's a lot of people that are going on vacation. So when is a good time? You're always going to have an obstacle year-round.
Absolutely,
but when is a good time, and how do you gauge when you should plan your event, the date?
Well, I think what you need to do is really look at the marketplace and really take a look at what other organizations, what we do, particularly for an organization that we support, we just call other organizations. There's usually master lists through your local newspaper or organizations that know what's happening to. And so we call a lot of organizations, say, what are you thinking you're having your event? We don't want to compete. We want to be cognizant and not overstep. if you can.
Well, that's
So,
smart.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in this together, so why don't we help each other, you know? So, so we do a lot of calling, find out what's happening, and then spring and fall is really your optimum times. You want to stay away from vacation time, which is, you know, summer months. You have a lower chance of having an audience that you want there. And then, of course, then you have the holidays in the winter months. So really most organizations look at spring or fall. Now, to set yourself apart and different, maybe summertime is the way to go, but you just have to be cognizant that you might not get everyone in the room that you want to get. But that would be the time frame that I would say is the most popular.
You know, in the last segment you were talking about giving them a heads up at your event this year as far as the date for next year. So especially if you're going to change it, if you have it usually in the fall and then you plan on having it in the spring or the summer or vice versa, being able to know ahead of time that's when we're going to have it and let them know, because it gives them also a chance to think ahead.
Right. Right, and I think, and it's a good point that you just brought up, is also if you're going to make any changes to the experience, is a great time to announce subtly that, you know, you're doing something different. Because what happens is, and you should be changing up your event experience from year to year or every few years because you don't want it to get stale. But that's another opportunity to announce, hey, here's the new date. We're going to be in a new venue. We're excited about it's going to be all new, and get a little bit of buzz talking. Like, don't share too much, but you just want to, you know, just give them a little teaser on, hey, we're changing it up. So.
You've said something to me before that I think would be really interesting for this audience too, and that being aware of when your guests may be budgeting or planning their budget. So talk a little bit about that. I think that's a really good point.
Sure. You know, I think early summer is really the time to be asking organizations, especially large organizations, because that's usually budget season. It depends on their fiscal year, but a lot of organizations, you know, March, April, May, June are really entrenched in developing their budgets for the future fiscal year or future year. So if you're looking to increase your organization A from a $5,000 sponsor to a $7,500, you know, stepping them up to the next. That time frame is when you really want to go out and
we're talking about corporate sponsors for your event then.
That's right, right. So if you really are, if you want them to stay status quo, you're comfortable, you feel like that they're at the right level, you've had those conversations, they're not going to, then, you know, doing a fall request for a spring event is satisfactory. But if you really want to get in, you've got a spring event, you want them to raise the level, you need to ask fairly early right after the event. So not only are they excited, but then you're also hitting them before they start allocating their budget dollars, because they only have a pool of funds usually that they can use to support organizations, the nonprofits. So be the first one in the door to ask and sit down.
See, I think that's such a vital point. I don't think that we often take enough time to think about the lives of the guests, whether they're the corporate sponsors or they're the individual donors who may be coming in, to say if they knew ahead of time that here was going to be, you know, most people are pretty savvy now. They know that there's going to be an ask, right,
Sure, absolutely.
at an event.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it gives them a little bit heads up to say, okay, so it's not going to be this time next year. It's going to be this time next year, so that they can then plan for that as well, whether they're a corporation or an individual.
Right.
Now, so what would you say? I've planned my event. I've got my corporate sponsorships lined up. I've got my date lined up. I did my save the date. I'm getting out there. Now I'm getting down to the event itself, planning the event. What are some essential elements for that event that I should remember to incorporate?
I would say video would be the first one, because it adds higher production value. It's what everyone's using video, but it's a great tool to control the messaging that you are offering to your guest in the audience. And it helps control time, because sometimes when you bring individuals that are, maybe it's a client that's been supported by your nonprofit, to share their story of how they found the nonprofit, and you know, it tug at the heartstrings of the guests, so you know, they really understand the mission. You may not they may not be comfortable doing that in front of a large audience. They may not have the expertise, and usually they don't. So video is a great way to control time, control the message, and really hit home in a quick way to pull at those emotional heartstrings of your guests.
That's good.
And then the second thing I would say is really looking at your staff and your board members to utilize them as ambassadors. utilize them to welcome your guest. Utilize them to move around the room during the event and welcoming them and shaking their hand and creating that personal connection to the organization. What I find in a lot of organizations is, the staff is sitting at an extra table, so that's additional costs. You've got board members who, should be sitting next to a funder. So you just have to look at, but you really need those ambassadors that are working the room during the event.
Do you have a
making sure they're having
ratio?
great
Is there
time.
something that you would say as far as if you're going to have 300 people, how many ambassadors would you want working the room and saying hi on behalf of your organization?
Yeah, I would say every 4 to 100 would be a good ratio. So for a
good.
300 room, I'd say 12 people.
Okay.
And then you can divvy the room like you would a serving staff. You'd have 3 or 4 tables that's their responsibility. And you know who's sitting at that table, so you would know on the staff level who would be the right person. It's just talking to them, getting them up to dance, making sure that they want for nothing, and really that will make it an even more special
Let me ask
occasion.
you this, because we do a lot in the nonprofit world with table captains. So you're a table captain and you invite 8 to 10 guests or
Right.
8 or 9 guests or
Right,
whatever you're
right.
going to have at your table, however many tables that you're going to do.
Sure.
Do they replace the staff and the board, or are they in addition to the staff and the board for the greeting that you're talking about, for the opportunity to say, on behalf of our organization, this is who we are?
I would say it's in addition to,
Okay.
just because I think the table hosts are typically donors, volunteers, funders who are really passionate about your organization and they want to bring their friends and colleagues to the event. So I would say you still need that staff to show a presence. Maybe they have information cards and pieces that they can hand out and pass out to, did you know, kind of factoids about your organization. So I always encourage in addition to.
Well, and it's a great opportunity, too, for your board to get connected with the people who are potentially interested in the community. I think a lot of times we rely on our board members to bring in donors, to connect us to that part of the community.
Right.
But here's an opportunity that's the reverse. Here are all these community members coming in that the board gets to see, and how
That's right.
rewarding that can be, too, as a
Absolutely.
board member, to actually connect with that community and say, this is cool. I get to meet the people who are interested in learning about the organization that I'm volunteering to sit on as a board.
Sure.
That's a
yeah,
great point.
Absolutely.
We are already in our second break mode, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at, you brought some possible ideas for centerpieces, because everybody's always looking for a centerpiece idea that can really enliven and connect with your mission. So we'll take another quick break, but when we come back, we're going to change the setup a little bit, and we're going to get into the centerpieces with Trace Kingham from Kingham Signature Events. We'll be right back.
And now a word from our studio sponsor.
Hi, I'm Jen Dodd, Education Manager at the Nonprofit Leadership Center, and I have a quick tip for nonprofits about tagging and using hashtags in Twitter. You can use hashtags to follow along and engage in online conversations around specific movements or events. For example, our CEO Emily recently participated in an event in Miami. While she was there live tweeting her takeaways and others' insights, I followed along in Tampa because she tagged the NLC in each of her tweets using @NLCTB, our hashtag handle, and she also used the event hashtag ThreadsMIA. I used the search bar at the top of the window to find all of the tweets with that hashtag. Then I retweeted points that would resonate with Tampa Bay nonprofits who couldn't be there in person and might not be following along. I also engaged other individuals and brands in conversation on Twitter. I swapped several comments with the host organization Independent Sector, as well as nonprofit pros from Tampa Bay and other communities. Because my CEO used the event hashtag and tagged NLC in her tweets, we made important new connections with nonprofits and funders, and we gained new followers. All of that increased the reach of our message that the Nonprofit Leadership Center is the go-to resource for nonprofits to learn the skills to run their businesses. And now you're ready to increase your reach and engagement with tagging and hashtags too.
The Philanthropy Show is on demand every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at both thephilanthropyshow.com and YouTube/WatchMVVP-TV.
Welcome back to the Philanthropy Show. This is the exciting part. Now you're ready for your event, so what do you put on the table? What can you make it to be fun and festive and reflect who you are? So Trace, you've got an assortment of things.
Sure.
So walk us through.
Okay. Well, I think first and foremost, you want to be bring continuity to the event space. So what we have over here in front of you is from the sponsor brochure that you were using to solicit donors, to the program that you have at every seat that kind of lists all of the auction items and thank yous and whatnot, to your table number, which has all of the same graphic elements. So even from the invitation, everything has continuity. So when your guests arrive, they know they've seen this graphic element and they know what they're there for. So I always encourage using continuity when it comes to your tabletops. For centerpieces, repetition adds drama. So, here's where we have the 3 little gourds that you could use. Anything that you have in repetition. Yeah, so I think anything that you repeat 3 or more really adds drama to your table. And it's an inexpensive way to create some interesting look to your tabletop.
Okay, so let me have you pause on that for a second. So you're doing your centerpiece, and if you don't have a large centerpiece, but you have little items that are reflective of your theme. So our theme is fall harvest or something.
Right.
And we've got these 3. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to put them in a row. You
could group them.
You could do whatever, but you're just saying 3 or more establishes a greater presence or appeal.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, you
Visually.
take this away, it's kind of like, but
Yeah,
you just add
it's
3. You always decorate in
It's a
threes.
poor
so
little
it's a
pumpkin
poor
all
little
by
pumpkin,
himself.
Yeah, poor guy. So, but I always emphasize just repetition. If you've got, then maybe over here you could set a few votives around it, and you've got a nice little inexpensive way, because it's important, because you want to be cognizant of the guests' perceptions of how much you're spending at the event.
Absolutely.
You could do something that is really, you got this, someone's going to donate all of these flowers to you, and you want to just go over the top. It might be a detriment to you, because you don't want the donors to think that you're spending all of their money that they just donated to you for this event to go to decorations.
Right.
They want it to go to the mission of the organization.
Right.
So just keep that in mind when you're doing these things. And it's a great way to keep it simple.
Wouldn't you say, too, tie it into, if you can in some way tie that centerpiece into the mission so that it's reflective of, if we're a food bank, maybe this is a squash that,
That's right.
that we're letting them know somehow that we're giving out, right?
Right. At the end of the event, it's a great way to just say all of this is going to be donated to this, or going to our food pantry, and so there's things that you can do. Food service organization donated these to us, and after the event, we're going to be putting them into our food pantry.
Yeah, cool. Love it.
Yeah, somehow to do that. Another easy, simple way to bring some elegance to your tabletop is you just go to a local decorator home goods store and find something. These were relatively inexpensive, well under $10. And I just take these little LED lights that you get at a craft store. They're
I love these.
Really prevalent. You can get them online. Really cool. And then just drop them inside, and
check it
they just kind of,
out.
it makes it glow. And another way you could then, if you wanted to do florals, you could just do a low floral arrangement on top of this, like we did for our event for the zoo.
Regina, can you see this? Let me move this out of the way so you can see the glow a little bit. And that's very simple. And you could even just put some tissue paper or decorative paper in there to
Absolutely.
make it a little bit more. How pretty.
And to add color, sometimes, a lot of times with organizations, you could take a nice colored napkin and set that in the middle of your table, and then place your centerpiece on top of that.
What a cool
so
idea.
You can do it in that way. Or paper. A lot of times you could use some square papers that you can get, the crafting little notebook papers.
Okay.
Another easy, inexpensive way is take a traditional clay pot that you get for 64 cents at your hardware store, and then I just took a can of white spray paint and just gently, from a distance, sprayed it to create, a vintage
kind of like
looking. It makes it look antiqued. And then another way is then just add some ribbon around the base of it, just with some hot glue or
Sweet.
some, two-faced tape. And now you've got a cute little pot for, maybe just put an ivy plant in there. Again, $2 for that. And then you've
Love
got
that.
a cute little centerpiece that you can use for your luncheon.
And
if it's a
again,
luncheon.
somehow tying it back into your mission, or growing. We're growing our
That's right.
our program, or we're something.
And then
I
a lot
love
of
these
times,
ideas.
you can take a little seedling of a tree and then hand that out to your guests and plant that and let that grow and remind them of what they
Love
just
it.
attended. And if you really want to embellish, then you can take, like if it's a holiday, you could take an ornament and put that on the front and again, it's another way to just easily dress up a centerpiece. And a really big trend right now is taking bark that you can get at your local craft store, some raffia, and wrap it around a traditional glass vase, and then you can just put some florals in there.
Oh,
So
that's
just
interesting.
again,
And so that's not actually even glued on. It's
no,
just wrapped
it's just
with
tied
the raffia.
on.
Got
Yeah,
it.
it's just all tied on with the raffia. We just tied it in the back here.
Okay, so I just learned something else today. I had no idea this was called raffia. Who knew? Really? Well, great ideas.
Really inexpensive ways to just bring a little bit of a sophistication and drama to your table.
And when you plan that centerpiece, now we see that we do have some pretty affordable ways to create a nice a centerpiece. When you're planning that centerpiece, how much do you want it to tie into the program of the night or into the organization itself? Or is there a guideline for that?
Yeah, I think it just is dependent upon the organization.
What you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think it's, if you can do it with, another great way to do that is create a nice table tent, a 3-sided table tent with your mission. Maybe it's key points that you want the guests to walk away with. That could be a great way, and you could put that around tube of, glass vase. So, but if those are more luncheon kind of applications or breakfasts. For dinners, I think the guests are thinking for a little more elegant. So that's where you might want to not necessarily have to tie in, but you could, again, with the table number, your program,
And these,
your
I
printed
love these, the
program.
program
So-
and the invitation. Very cute. Wow. Well, Trace, thank you so much for some guidance towards the event.
Absolutely.
Our event guru, Trace Kingham.
Appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for being
Thank
on the
you.
show.
Appreciate
I actually just shook your hand, but I wanted to ask you about Truth or Care.
Oh.
Why do you work with nonprofits?
Well, as a young child, I was bullied quite a lot, and in college, I approached a nonprofit who got me resources that helped me become who I am today and
Wow.
be grounded and overcome those challenges. So I look for organizations to help that are helping others the way I was helped. So it's a great way for me to just remind myself that, if it wasn't for that, I don't know where I would be today.
Wow.
So that's one.
Well, I'm glad that I remembered to ask you that. This
Yeah.
was so much fun. I was just
Yeah.
going to just boom, 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 but that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Thank you for connecting back then.
Absolutely.
Kind
Thank
of
you.
paying it back, forward,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Loved it. Well, I hope you got some great ideas for some events and have a better idea of the timeline, the essential elements, and some fun ideas for your centerpieces. So we will see you next Monday at 4 o'clock with an all-new philanthropy show. Have a great week.
Do you have an idea for the Philanthropy Show? Contact us via our website or email us at tps@myvideovoice.com.